Welcome to You Don't Know Ball. Today, we're going to be talking about the Saints with James Skrmetta. As always, if you don't know ball and want to know ball, be sure to subscribe. Leave a like. Let us know in the comments what you think the Saints' record will be this year. So, James, obviously, it has been kind of an interesting offseason for the Saints. Not a ton was done in free agency. I think that has to do with the cap, and there was a little bit of turnover on offense. So what has been your favorite move of the offseason, whether that is OC, someone you picked up in free agency, and then after this, we'll have a question about the draft. So just kind of limit it to that.
It has to be the OC. Like, our biggest problem last year and the year before was Pete Carmichael. He was cosplaying as Sean Payton. He had no innovation, no evolution. And you could see it all year long. You know, Carr was getting crushed because of play calls. Our personnel decisions were horrible. Alvin Kamara was never on the field on third downs. So bringing in a new staff and going outside of the building is a huge culture change. Like, we were stuck in that world of trying to be Drew Brees and Sean Payton. And when you don't have Drew Brees and Sean Payton there, it's a very difficult thing to do. So we were trying to hold on to this culture without the players. When you're trying to hold on to the Drew Brees culture with the combination of Trevor Siemian and Ian Book and Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton, it's not going to work. So it has to be the OCs, especially the fact that they're young, they're coming from good systems, they're innovative, they're different. It's a different thought. I think it's energized the team, the players. Certainly, it's energized the fans. Fans are ready to roll. So if I can cheat a little bit and say the coaching staff being brought in, that's my favorite move. If I had to pick a player, it would probably be Chase Young, just because of it solves a need with the pass rush, but it also is such a like high reward ceiling for a 24-year-old former second overall pick. So if he can turn out to be something, that would be enormous for us.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't even call the coaching staff cheating because we've seen bad coaching can cripple a team. We saw what happened in for the Chargers. Like, they got Justin Herbert and they're missing the playoffs. They have other skill players on their team. They're missing the playoffs. Like, Brandon Staley, like, really crippled that team's ability to be a better team. I know it's the AFC West and, you know, you have the Chiefs and you're not going to probably win that division, but coaching can make or break a team, in my opinion, and adding a young guy like that to work with Carr, who actually played pretty well at the end of the season last year. I think, like we were talking about a little bit before the call, or actually I was watching in one of your videos, it just kind of revitalizes the team, that young energy.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like how we talked about Drew Brees and Sean Payton. Sean Payton was arguably the best offensive mind as far as coaching goes in the NFL at the time. Drew Brees was arguably a top 5 quarterback to ever live. Instead of replacing them with a new offensive mind and a new good quarterback, we just looked around in the building and said, let's see if they can figure it out here. And when they couldn't, I do give Mickey Loomis in the front office a lot of credit because he only waited 2 years. You know, he only allowed that little experiment to go on. And he said, okay, I was wrong. Let's do a complete turnover. Let's go totally outside the building. Because whenever we fired Pete Carmichael and, you know, he went and paid in his face like a clown and joined the circus like he should have. And at the beginning, the thought was, we're going to hire from within again. We're going to promote Ronald Curry, and we're going to keep rotating this, you know, this fake Sean Payton thing. The fact that Mickey was, you know, when he said, I'll take this, I was wrong, and went and found somebody else, that to me was a huge boost for the fan base and for everyone that we are trying to change. Like, it's completely changed the trajectory of the Saints.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, James, I absolutely not cheating with the coaching staff, because as a fellow Saints fan myself, I would agree far and away our biggest issue last year. And I'm with you on Chase Young. But I think 100% the coaching staff, you know, the changes were absolutely necessary. So to transition into the draft from, you know, the coaching staff to free agency, you know, because it's pretty, you know, there's only probably a few options generally with how our draft went. But, you know, all in all, what was your favorite pick and why?
Well, that is a polarizing conversation, a polarizing topic, because a lot of people, and my first thought was Spencer Rattler, because of the value of getting him so late in the draft and also how high his ceiling can be. I mean, Rattler, not too long ago, was the consensus favorite to win the Heisman. Not too long ago was the consensus favorite to be the first overall pick. and Rattler kind of had some, and like he got beat out by Caleb Williams. That's not exactly the worst player to lose your job to at Oklahoma, right? And then he went to South Carolina. Rattler looked good there. He could have completely folded. We've heard that he was a prima donna, and we heard that he had some, locker room issues. And I think going to South Carolina changed a lot of that. Now, I'll caveat that because we're not going to see Spencer Rattler for 2 seasons. We're stuck with Derek Carr. So I'll walk it back to Talise Fuaga. When we signed Chase Young, it was very obvious what we were going to do in the draft. If we wouldn't have signed Chase Young, I think there's a good chance we take a defensive player at that pick. But Chase Young is kind of a draft pick. 24 years old, not too far removed from college. It's not exactly the same, but he is a young player at a position we needed. The position we needed even more was an offensive lineman. So Talise Fuaga being there, specifically his skill set. So what's Fuaga good at? Fuaga's good at outside zone run blocking. That is exactly what Clint Kubiak wants to do. So not only was he a position of need, but he's a scheme fit. I mean, you could have drawn up a better rookie pick. So I love the Fuaga pick. I think he's going to be great. And he brings a little bit of tenacity, a little meanness. He's Oos. We acknowledge the tribal chief here on my channel. So I like that he's from the island, but I think he brings a lot to us. So I like it. I think it's going to work out. And, he's moving positions, which is a little controversial yet brave, but I got faith.
No, I absolutely have faith too. So yeah, to cover like first what you said about Spencer Rattler, very important to remember because not a lot of people know this, not a lot of people think about this. But as he said, when there was a question where they're asking like interviews, like draft interviews, and he said like what my biggest trait is that I think teams should look for is that I've already played in 4 offenses in college. I know a lot of terminology. I have a lot of experience running different things. That's going to be huge for his transition now that he gets to sit for those couple years, like you said. But on top of it, I'm with you 100%. Talise Fuaga, Hunter will tell you, was one of my favorite players the whole draft process. I wasn't on Fuaga like 9-10 months ago, where I'm like, man, this guy over here at Oregon State, man, hold on, like he's not getting enough praise. I really did not think that our Saints were going to be the ones to pull the trigger on him. Not necessarily because that we wouldn't be able, or that we wouldn't, just that we wouldn't be able to. Honestly, I thought he was going to be gone before we picked. I thought that somebody would, really like the talent that he has. But I think he'd be a future All-Pro. I'm so excited to have him on the roster as well. But there's really not a wrong answer for favorite draft pick, right? I think you would agree. This was the first draft in a while where as Saints fans as a whole can kind of be like, whoa, I can see the vision. There wasn't any experimenting going on with any high value picks. It's like, all right, here's the vision. It actually was run. It actually, there's a purpose behind the vision. There's no more experimenting, which is definitely a turn that we wanted to see as fans.
It's the same thing as I was saying with the coaches, where this draft was so good, and it's been lauded by everybody. I mean, PFF gave it an A+. Everyone I've seen has pretty much given it an A or an A+. But it's also the most different draft we've had because before, when we had Sean Payton, we were drafting all these developmental players from random universities because the thought was Sean is such a good coach. We can get someone in and develop them, right? We had Dennis Allen as the DC, Sean is the head coach, and basically the OC. So you could take a chance on developing those players. Again, when you don't have Sean Payton and you're still drafting those players to develop, who the hell is developing these guys, right? And then you look at this year, what did we do? We took an offensive lineman who didn't allow a sack his entire season at Oregon State. We know we were getting there. And then in the second round, where they wanted to reach, they wanted to get Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky or something like that. But they said, you know what? Let's take the best player available right now. Let's go to Alabama and let's get a cornerback. Do we need a cornerback? Not necessarily, but he's too good to pass up. And then Spencer Rattler is completely different than any quarterback we've seen in 15 years? You look at who we try to replace Breeze with. Like I said, Trevor Siemian, Ian Book, Jake Kaner, Andy Dalton. They're all the same player. Rattler is a totally different player. And that alone tells you that this new coaching staff, they are picking players they want. The identity has changed. The culture has changed. All that has shifted. So that's I love the draft. I think we nailed it. We knocked it out of the park.
So
no, I would definitely agree. This was the first time in a while that I could say we knocked it out of the park.
Kind of going off that, like with the coaching staff picking their players, like how confident are you that Clint Kubiak can kind of turn the offense into one of the better units in the league? Obviously, there's like talent differences in terms of some teams being better offenses, but overall, like it should probably be night and day from Pete Carmichael, right?
It's going to be totally different. I mean, I think now more than ever, if I asked you like pop quiz, who was the OC for the Packers when they won the Super Bowl in 1997? No one would know, right? Like back then, it didn't matter. Back then, you needed a head coach, and that was it. The head coach was the authority figure. Now it's so much more specialized. Like you look at the Texans, who gets all the credit for their offense? Bobby Slowick. You look at the Lions, who gets all the credit for their offense? Ben Johnson. It's not just a head coach now. So coordinators are really, really important, but on both sides of the ball in the NFL. I think the head coach is almost kind of, I've been saying I think that there should be way more coaches. Like the decisions of 2-point conversions and fourth downs and stuff like that. Why is head coaches making that? Why isn't there a group of people from MIT running numbers in the booth making those decisions? And we're kind of seeing that with the coordinators. So I think Kubiak is going to come in, and we know what he's going to do. We know what San Francisco likes to do. We know what Clint liked to do when he was an OC. So it will look night and day difference. The fact that Dennis Allen is still the head coach, I would say has zero bearing on the change of the offense. I'll give you all one example or two examples of how it will change, just for Saints fans to kind of understand what they'll see. Last year, Clint Kubiak or the San Francisco 49ers were second to last, penultimate, as they say, in 3 wide receiver sets. That was the most sets that we ran in New Orleans. In New Orleans, Pete Carmichael, 0 times, 0, had 2 running backs on the field at the same time, which is kind of crazy to even think about. He ran 0 plays with 2 running backs on the field. The San Francisco 49ers run the ball or have run plays with 2 running backs or more 30% of the time. So let's round down. Let's say Kubiak calls plays with 2 running backs on the field at the same time, 25% of the time. That is a monumental change in what the Saints are going to look like. It's going to be a completely different offense.
No, yeah, a lot more I form, a lot more strong formation. We're gonna get back to actually instead of trying to just run the ball out of the shotgun and not have the line moving anything, and then go to the basic stock plays. We're actually gonna have motion. We're actually gonna have purpose. We're gonna have design. It is gonna be a very, very welcome change.
The pre-snap motion will be totally different because last year we couldn't do that either. We were the worst in the league at pre-snap motion and creativity. This offense is built on pre-snap motion and creativity. They are going to set you up. I mean, I can already tell you what it's going to look like right now. They're going to bring everything in. They're going to have multiple tight ends or multiple running backs out there. They're going to have 1 or 2 wide receivers. Everything's going to be condensed. Then you're going to see the motion. You're going to see motion nonstop, and Kubiak and company are going to adjust off of what they see the defense do, which, again, we didn't do that whatsoever. So it will be night and day. Now, will that guarantee success? Will that guarantee results? Can't say that. But I can tell you that just visually, just the strategy, the plan, the scheme, 100% different.
No, absolutely. And I think it's the perfect transition that I actually headed to the next question, because this is the one that's more pertinent. We have faith in Kubiak, as we've already, declared. Like, that's not really what we're worried about.
I love him.
What we're worried about, as I think you would agree, is even though we finished the year very well, it was going under the radar. It's kind of not really talked about. But Derek Carr finished the year actually very well relatively to the beginning of the season. How much faith do we have that this move to the West Coast offense is going to help Derek Carr? Because, again, people always forget, but when he was with John Gruden, that West Coast offense, probably until the whole thing happened with Gruden, best year of his career, moving the ball really well and looked like a different Derek Carr. Can he get back to that same version? Or are you not sold on that as much?
I think it's a good offense for Carr, too. Like, this offense, again, if you think about what the offense wants to do, the offense has to have a quarterback that he'll be able to read what's happening with all the motion and all the pre-snap movement and the creativity, and he'll be able to run it really efficiently. This offense is a very fast offense. We saw it with Sean Payton in Denver, but when Russell Wilson started to improv, the offense fell apart. This style does not want a quarterback to go off script. It doesn't want Derek Carr to hold the ball for a long time or start doing stuff on his own. And when does Derek Carr get in trouble? When he holds the ball for too long and takes sacks. So if he can just do what Brock Purdy does and just run this thing, get playoff play action, be smart, be efficient, that's perfect. And man, talk about a perfect quarterback to have to read a defense and to be efficient is a guy who's been in the league for 11 years. So we don't need Carr to be, 50 touchdowns and 10 interceptions and 5,000. We don't need that at all. We just need him to be efficient. And like you said, he was people down here, I mean, Derek Carr is as polarizing gets. People act like he was the worst quarterback in the NFL. I've had people tell me that Derek Carr shouldn't even be a starter. And what do you have? 25 touchdowns and 11 picks last year in the worst year of his career with a horrific offensive coordinator. Like, as bad as people think Carr was, not too bad.
3,800 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions is not bad. There are definitely worse quarterbacks in the league. Now, obviously, Olave is hopefully taking another step this year. How confident are you that Shaheed or Perry could be that number 2 punch for him?
Well, that's another good thing with this offense is that we don't have to have this like 4 or 5 wide receiver deep wide receiver room. Having Chris Olave as your number 1, there's a lot of teams in the NFL who would love to have Chris Olave as their number 1. I keep hearing like our skill position players, when you look at the core of who we have with Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, Taysom Hill, you can throw in Shaheed. If you compare that to a team like the Falcons, who everyone seems to be really high on, I would take Olave over Drake London for sure. And is Bijan Robinson that much better than Alvin Kamara? We don't know about that yet. And Kyle Pitts, is he better than either one of y'all two? We don't even know that, right? So if you look at just the playmakers we have, pretty solid, and they all fit this system. So I think Olave, I think he has been a sneaky top 10-ish level receiver, and that's with bad quarterback play, and that's with bad offensive coordinators. I think Alvin Kamara can still be one of the best all-purpose backs in the NFL. So, yeah, throw Rashid Shaheed in there, Taysom in there, A.T. Perry in there. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I think
the big thing with me is, and don't get me wrong, I agree completely. I love Olave, and I do think he's going to keep making these jumps. But you'd agree. The one thing that we do need to tune in this year, and he needs to really get really fix, was there was definitely some catch point issues last year where he feels the contact. He kind of he'll just kind of use his body more than his hands, and it'll lead to some drops and some critical moments. That's the big thing I really want to see tuned this year. But if he can change that, if he can just tweak that a little bit, and to your point, in this offense, we could see Olave go for 1,250 plus. I don't know about touchdown numbers, but regardless, we can see him being a 80 plus yards very consistently every week type of player. If he just can fix those drop issues and get more of a consistent connection with Carr, that's definitely what we need to see next going forward here.
Yeah, I actually had this conversation recently, and I was on the other side of it. So I was saying that I would rather have like Garrett Wilson than Chris Olave. And I went and started looking at the numbers, and I started looking at drop rate, contested catch rate, separation, all that. Very similar. Very, very similar. But I think a lot of people would assume Wilson's been better. But if you kind of look at what's happening, I do agree. Olave at times can get a little loose on the routes. At times they can be a little less than crisp. But overall, and again, with kind of below average people throwing him the ball, he has been good. He's been really good analytically.
No, definitely. We'll take him on our team any day.
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah.
So
next question I have for you here. Well, I'm sorry, Hunter. What
no,
you
go ahead. I was just going to transition.
Yeah, I was going to say. So for the next question we had here, and this is we'll move over to the O line. Because obviously the O line has been a big issue for us in recent history, as you know best. Do you think the move to the West Coast offense will be able to help them as much as that it could help Carr potentially? Because that's really it goes hand in hand.
Yeah, I think this is another point of contention. So in today's NFL, I think offensive line is one of those things where people love to say it. It's like you always want to have a good offensive line. People think you need one. But in reality, I don't think it's as important as people think. If you look at the Texans last year, they had a bottom 5 offensive line. You know who had top 5 offensive lines last year? The Atlanta Falcons and the Indianapolis Colts. They had 4 and 5. How'd that work out for them? Right? Cincinnati Bengals, when they went to the Super Bowl, bottom 5 offensive line. If you have a scheme that can get around your offensive line, a quarterback that doesn't hold the ball for a long time, you can get away with it. Now, we can't get away with having the worst offensive line. We just need to have an average to below average offensive line. And I think the offense lends itself to, being quick, like I said, play action, all the motion. Carr shouldn't hold the ball very long. Even the Niners. The Niners offensive line isn't that sporty. The Chiefs offensive line isn't that sporty. But they have a very efficient scheme. They have a very efficient strategy. When you get hurt with a bad offensive line, is when you have Pete Carmichael as your OC and Derek Carr's taking 14-step drops and getting blasted. And you look at the wide receivers, and they're not even halfway through their route. There was so many times where he was getting hit, and you'd look at the all 22, and Chris Olave, he is so far away from the top of his route, and that is a big change too.
Yeah, I think something that we've discussed through a couple of these interviews is, at the end of the day, if you have just an average O-line and everybody on the line is just average, it's so much better than having an elite guard or an elite tackle and then having a super weak link on there, because you're creating more pressure for the whole offensive line. And I think if the Saints can just get back to creep towards like an average offensive line, I think you're fine, especially in an offense where you want to get the ball out quick. I mean, that's what you look at, like Joe Burrow, like you were talking about in Cincinnati and Kansas City. Like, you have both these quarterbacks who know when to get the ball out, and that is the biggest thing. So kind of moving towards the coaching in terms of how the team is run in general, what do you think are kind of the minimum requirements for Dennis Allen to stay around this year? Like, do you think it's a playoff berth? Do you think it's a 500 well, there's no 500 finishes anymore, but you get where I'm going with this.
Yeah. I mean, it is a razor's edge because results are so tricky. The Saints last year their last season was considered a failure. A lot of people believe that Dennis Allen should have been fired, Mickey Loomis should have been fired, Gail Benson should sell the team, Derek Carr should be fired. Like, people were ready to riot in the streets. But Derek Carr getting hurt in Green Bay away from being an NFC South champion 10-win team. So results are weird, because you could look at that and say, well, I mean, you know, would Dennis Allen's legacy and career and all that stuff, would he be on the hot seat if we're defending NFC South champions? Probably not. So unfortunately, though, he is on the hot seat. I'd say anything under 9 wins, if they took a step back result wise and we won 7 games or 8 games, I think you're looking at Dennis probably getting fired. But that's tricky too, because Dennis he is the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. If you just look at DCs, if he is the number one guy. We saw it last year. My guy Patton Analytics on Twitter, he does a report every week. He does OCs and DCs, and he ranks them per play on expected value. At the end of the year, Dennis was number one. So analytically, this isn't just me guessing. He was number one. So if you're Mickey Loomis, do you really want to fire the best defensive coordinator in the NFL? That's tough. That's a real tough ask. So I hope, I mean, if we went 6-7 games, yeah, fire him. You got to do something. But if we're around 9 games again, somewhere in there, I hope they don't fire him.
Well, just to kind of go off that and what you were saying in terms of like results being tricky, I think that's one of the biggest things that me and Dobbs talk about when it comes to a division rival of yours, Todd Bowles. Like, we saw what the Buccaneers did last year, and we saw they overperformed. But I think, I don't know, just in my feeling of the situation, I don't think Todd Bowles is necessarily the guy to really get them where they want to go. And obviously their roster has its own issues with aging guys, and they kind of have to rework the situation there. But it is tough because Todd Bowles just won a playoff game, and it's almost like, but do we trust him to do that again over and over again? So I get what you're saying with the Dennis Allen situation, because it is really tricky and based on just different circumstances that happen throughout the season that could limit success.
Yeah, Bowles is a little different.
I just got to chime in. Well, I'm sorry. No, what were you going to say first, James? I just have one last comment on this one.
I was going to say, Bowles is an interesting one because you could, like, let's say the Buccaneers take a big step backwards offensively because Canales left, their OC from last year. Let's say that Baker looks worse, and then you could put a lot of that success last year on Canales, and then I think you could get off Bowles. The Saints' problem is that the defense has been good. You know, we do know what Dennis Allen is doing. We know he is actually affecting the team. So if the offense takes a step forward, but the results aren't necessarily there wins and losses wise, that's a tricky thing. Because then if you fire Dennis Allen, you're not going to fire Clint Kubiak if the offense is better, but the results aren't there.
Right.
So then you're firing Dennis Allen to go find a head coach that needs to be a defensive guy, but you can't get a defensive guy that's better than Dennis Allen. So it's a really like Sudoku puzzle situation.
Well, I was going to say, that's why I was going to comment. Like, I'm with you 100%, James. Like my biggest problem, because I'll talk to my dad, who's also a Saints fan. Like a lot of our discourse. My one fellow Saints fan in the area, because we're over here, we're in Illinois, so it's hard to find the Who Dat Nation down here.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, like, it's all to your point. Dennis Allen he's literally because I know the exact same analyst you're talking about, where he is literally the defensive play caller of defensive play callers for what. On top of it, like we don't have a ton of like star talent on the defense. He's made it work very well. We've developed a lot of guys very well that weren't like that we didn't expect to hit a ceiling as they've hit. And that's just I'm right there with you, just to echo the same sentiment. Like it's so tough because we want better results, but on the other hand, it's like if we fire Dennis Allen, this defense, and as a Saints fan, we have not had a defense like Dennis Allen's defense. Oh man, it took a decade plus. If we gave Drew Brees, in prime Drew Brees, Dennis Allen's defense, we would be a multi-Super Bowl championship franchise. So it's a tough line to walk, and I'm very much with you 100%, where it's like, it's from the outside looking in, it's much easier. But if you're the Saints fan that's experienced all those years of horrendous, literally historically bad defenses, it's much harder to want a guy like Dennis Allen out the door, no matter what the results are looking like right now, because the roster situation is just so tricky.
I think Allen's a bad, and I don't want to get this misconstrued. I think Allen's a bad head coach. I think when it comes to kind of the same thing we see with like Mike McCarthy and some coaches like that, where I don't think Allen's great at time management, fourth downs. Should they go for on 2-point conversions? Like managing the end of halves. I don't think he gets that, and not a lot of coaches do. But someone like Dan Campbell, he doesn't get it either. But he's got a lot of help. He's got analytic guys in the booth handling his situational game theory. He's got Ben Johnson. You have to have those guys now. If Clint Kubiak is the guy I think he is, then I have a sneaky feeling all those problems we've had are going to go away. Could be wrong, for sure. But Dennis looks like he's getting back to defense and focusing only on the defense. I wouldn't be surprised at all if everything looks better just because of these new coaches, and now I'm putting a lot on Kubiak. I'll say that. I have a lot of respect for this guy and a lot of respect for how he's looking. And Andrew Janoko, his quarterback coach, hearing both of them talk has me fired up for just how we're looking at the game, how we're looking at, like I said, game theory and situational stuff. And I think Dennis could be one of the biggest benefactors from this change.
100%. I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, and with Dennis getting back to defense, how big of a difference do you see Chase Young making on the defensive line? And what do you kind of expect from him this year?
Well, the Saints were in a tricky spot this offseason because of the salary cap. They always are in a tricky spot because of the salary cap. The Saints had to do two things in the offseason. They had to get younger. Last year, we were the oldest team in the NFL. Not that really matters, but we were the oldest team. And they had to do it with cheap contracts. Chase Young fills both of those. Chase Young is young, and his contract is incentive-based. So if he doesn't play because he's hurt or whatever happens, we don't really have to pay him. Now, let's say he does play. And let's say Dennis Allen figures out what to do with Chase Young, which I would think the best DC in football would be able to do that. Let's say Chase Young gives you 10 sacks, all right, which isn't crazy. Let's say you sign him now to a long-term deal. And we know the Saints are the best team in the NFL at manipulating the salary cap, kicking the can down. We all know that. So you could get a 24-year-old pass rusher on a big long-term contract on basically what we have right now is a free rental season. So Chase Young is very low risk and very high reward. I would say if he gives us anything near 8 to 10 sacks, I'd be thrilled. I'd be absolutely thrilled.
I think that's great value
That's
for the
that's
money.
like my expectations at this point. Like, I feel like I'm with you where it's like, I just want to see him get back to even 75% of the rookie season. And I'll be very optimistic going forward. And what were you going to say, Hunter?
No, I just said it's great value for the money because realistically, who else are you getting? Like, why not take a shot on a young guy who still has a lot in the tank?
Exactly. I mean, he was really good in the Super Bowl. Like, Chase, this isn't a guy who's like off of 4 years of knee injuries or we haven't seen play in a while. He was good last year.
Yeah.
He has been good a majority of his career. Hasn't been kind of, he's moved teams. He's been hurt at times, sure. But when he's out there, he has been effective. And we were horrible at rushing the passer last year. So anything at all would be a huge boom. And the fact that you can take a chance on a 24-year-old, Why not? I'm with you.
Are you
Absolutely.
worried about any of the Lattimore trade rumors? Like, do you think that's something
No.
that could happen? No.
I mean, I wouldn't, like, I think he could get moved. Yeah.
Mhm.
But his salary is interesting. Like, his contract's interesting. The Saints have to make a decision on him basically every year. And when you have to make a decision on a player, especially someone as good as Marshawn Lattimore, I think you do have to have him available to be traded. Like, that has to be an option. So the rumors I'm not too concerned about. I'm sure there's conversations
Mhm.
in the building, whether they're telling Lattimore, like, listen, we are shopping you, but we don't want to trade you. And I do. Mickey Loomis has come out and said that. Mickey Loomis has said, we do not want to trade him, which I think that's true. I don't think they want to trade him. If they have to trade him, I think they will trade him. But I mean, I love having him on the team, obviously. But I mean, our salary cap situation is very unique, and sometimes it's out of the hands of the front office.
No, yeah, that is how it goes, and that's yeah, and that because I say I'm a little concerned about the Deshaun trade just because how a big of a part of the team as he's been, and just the identity I feel like that he helps bring to this defense, right? Just the hard nose, stay focused. That is really what Marshawn embodies, which is why I think having him on the team is so important. But to your point, it is business. And the reality is, look, if he does get traded, at least that's why I'm sure more than anything, the Kool-Aid pick is at the very least high quality insurance for Marshawn. I would want to pivot back to the offense real quick. There's one offensive question that I wanted to ask you because this is one, a lot of people that aren't Saints fans really wouldn't be paying attention to this. They haven't even really thought about this man yet because they haven't gotten to see him a lot, whether it was due to injuries or just him being down on the depth chart. I'm curious though. Do you think that there's any chance that maybe not RB1, but do we see a lot more of Kendre Miller at this point and maybe potentially taking over that RB1 spot? Because I know I personally loved what I saw towards the very end of the season when he came back healthy finally. He was moving around really well.
I think there's like a 4-part question. I think the first part is he is good. I like what I saw from him. The running back one part, I would say no. Like, Alvin Kamara is no doubt, unless he is injured, he is our running back one, and he certainly should be. And he is the guy. I think this year will be the renaissance year for AK-41. I mean, like I said, him and Christian McCaffrey, I just had like a 20-minute video on this because people were trashing me for comparing Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara. But if you pull up their stats, their career side by side, it is almost to the number identical. So everything that San Francisco asked Christian McCaffrey to do, Alvin Kamara can do the exact same thing. Will it be the same production level? Probably not. But he is the perfect guy. So if Kendre Miller does, and like I mentioned earlier here, there will be a lot of sets with 2 running backs on the field. I hope Kendre Miller is that second running back. I hope he is on the field a lot for sure. I think that'd be fantastic. It's only beneficial to the team to have all your playmakers on the field, right? So I hope he does get a chance to shine. I hope he stays healthy, but I don't think there's any world where Alvin slips on the depth chart or Kendra, is getting the bulk of the carries. I don't see that at all.
See, that wasn't the thing. It was just more the injuries for me. But I'm with you. If Alvin's healthy, renaissance season for sure. And yeah, it's a welcome sight for us.
So
yeah, I mean, Alvin is super underrated too. Like, he's a guy where if you're not paying attention to the Saints, and the NFC South is probably like the least paid attention to division in the NFL, but Alvin's right up there. Like, he's up there with the best all-purpose backs in the NFL. He has been the majority of his career. Last year was a weird year. Started off the season suspended. We had the problems with our offense, and he never really got going. But if you look at, like I said, if you look at his career compared to someone like CMC, you really see what he's done, or what he can do, I guess.
Is there anyone on the roster, like depth-wise, that kind of scares you going into the year?
Like a personnel group?
Yeah, like a personnel group.
Yeah,
like,
the offensive line.
Yeah.
The offensive line is horrible. The offensive line, like, I'll ask you, Dobbs, who's our best offensive lineman?
Well, you're already, I would say Eric McCoy, but that's the problem is outside of Eric, right? It's kind of like, and that's Ramczyk when he's healthy, but then now we have all the questions about
we're not
Ramczyk.
counting Ramczyk. We're not counting Ramczyk.
Yeah,
I
so
think
at
a
that
lot
point,
of
it's like McCoy and then to your point, right?
I think a lot of people would say, they may say Talise Fuaga, and we haven't even seen him play in the NFL. So there's a chance that our offensive line, if Talise Fuaga can't play and Trevor Penning continues to not be able to play, if that's the case, we could quickly be the worst offensive line in the NFL. So we desperately need production out of guys that one, we've never seen produce in Talise Fuaga, and two, Trevor Penning, who we've seen be so bad that they had to remove him from the jumbo package last year. So that is the one thing that really does concern me, because I keep talking about Kubiak will do this, we'll be able to run this, we'll be able to do this, Carr will do this, Alvin Kamara Renaissance season this. If we're as bad as this offensive line could be, all that does kind of go out the window. So I'm very concerned about the offensive line. Every other position group and personnel group, I'm pretty chill with. The Saints remind me a lot of the Buccaneers last year, where before the season last year, people were like, the Buccaneers could be the worst team in the NFL. And you look around and you're like, well, Mike Evans is pretty good. Chris Godwin's pretty good. Rashad White's pretty good. Baker's pretty average. Okay, the defense is good. It's like, how is that the worst team in the NFL? You look at the Saints, we have a top 5 linebacker in Demario Davis, a top 5 cornerback in Marshawn Lattimore, one of the best safeties in the NFL in Tyrann Mathieu, a top 10 wide receiver in Chris Olave, a top 5 all-purpose back in Alvin Kamara. You look at that and you're like, man, there is some talent here in all those position groups. The only place that I can't say we have a plus level player is our defensive line and our offensive line. So, and we've addressed the defensive line with Chase Young, and Cam Jordan should be coming back off of injury. He should be better, but we haven't really addressed the offensive line.
Yeah. I mean, the offensive line is, and Hunter will tell you, I harp on it all the time. It's genuinely very, very concerning. But to your point, look, if Clint Kubiak comes and does what we hope he does, we get the ball out quickly. It's kind of like we were talking to a 49ers creator the other day, Wayne Breezy, and he was kind of saying, like what you were saying, where it's like the reality is, I think sometimes, you don't need to have an entirely, fantastic O-line. The reality is, if you can just have like 1 or 2 good pieces and the rest of the guys know their assignment, they do what they have to do consistently, and you're getting the ball out quickly, just like the Niners basically had last year. Right. I mean, nobody's going to discredit what Trent Williams has done. He's one of the greatest offensive linemen of all time at this point.
Yeah,
but you take him out of the equation, there's not a ton of real talent on that Niners line, and they made it work incredibly well. Right. A few plays away from being Super Bowl champions. I think we can apply that same logic to the Saints. We just need one guy to step up, which hopefully, to your point, is Talise Fuaga.
I love the offensive line discussion. And leading up to the draft, I was having this conversation a lot. Like, pop quiz for your viewers. And don't cheat, guys. Don't cheat in the comments below. Okay. But if I ask them, who is even the right guard for the Chiefs? Who is even the right guard for the Eagles? Who's the right guard for the Falcons? They have no clue. Who's the right tackle for the 49ers? We know Trent Williams. Who's on the other side? I don't know. Name the left tackle for the Lions. We know Penei Sewell. Who's the left guard for the Lions? Not only do we not know like who's good, who's bad when it comes to the offensive line, we can't even name these guys, right? The Miami Dolphins last year, the Miami Dolphins led the NFL with 5.1 yards carry. A passing offense, right? Tyreek Hill had 1,700 yards receiving. They led the NFL, 5.1 yards carry. They were 5th in the NFL in rushing yards, okay? Name anyone on the Miami Dolphins offensive line. Can't do it. But what system does the Miami Dolphins run? What running scheme do they run? I'll give you a hint, a spoiler, if you will. It's the same system that we're going to run down here in New Orleans. So a no-name offensive line, go look in Miami. A no-name offensive line can produce, and hopefully that's what happens with us.
No, yeah, we need it. We desperately need it, and the positivity is more importantly what we need also, because for the first time, as we said, and I feel like probably a long time here, there's actually real optimism going into the season, which is such a welcome change.
Man, that's another thing that's crazy. Like I grew up with the Saints when they were in the like Aaron Brooks, Jim Haslett era, and I hear all the time how people now are like, man, the Saints are just like last season, a dumpster franchise. We haven't been good in forever, all this stuff. If you go back and look, and it's kind of wild to see, but since 2000, the Saints are like the 7th most winning franchise in the NFL. We've sneaky now been good for a long period of time. This is whether you want to believe it or not, Saints fans, we are a winning franchise. Like the days of the Aints, the days of all of that is so far gone. Go look. You want to see a franchise who has not lived up to expectations? Go look at the Dallas Cowboys. Since 2000, how many Super Bowls have they been in? 0. How many NFC championship games have they been in? 0. go look at the Saints, right? Super Bowl, 3 NFC Championship games? We've won the division more than the Cowboys have won their division. Okay, so the fans who they hold on to that like old kind of bad history of the Saints, but we need to accept as Saints fans, we need to accept that we are one of the most winning and relevant franchises for the last 2 decades. So there should be positivity. I think people just like to be miserable sometimes, but we're way better of a franchise than people give us credit for.
Yeah, I think
No, I need to chime in. This well, how do you go first?
I was just gonna say, when you're not
you go first.
If you're not a Panthers fan, then you don't really know, like, when your team hasn't been down in the dumps for a while, like really bad. So it's like kind of like that jaded thing of like, even with the Patriots, like no matter what, 7-win seasons are just garbage.
Let me look, talking about the Panthers. The Panthers shouldn't even be in the NFC South. They should be in a division with Meg Thee Stallion, Cardi B, and Nicki Minaj because they are ass. That's it. So the Panthers are horrific. They are nowhere near the other 3 teams in the NFC South. They are off the charts bad. That organization, I do feel bad for the Panthers fans. No hate, Panthers fans. All right, don't come after me.
You gotta call it how it is. Gotta call it how it is.
Look, I'm rooting for y'all. It is what it is. Tepper's
I'm not. We got their pick. They need to lose.
Oh, that's true. Okay, well, I'll root for you then.
Yeah, thank you.
So I agree. They are an exception. They can be miserable, but the Saints fans cannot.
Yeah. I just need to say, like, it's so upsetting because I'm with you, James. Like, and this is something we've talked about this on the show. I've told Hunter all the time. Unfortunately, Saints fans, and you're spot on. It's that the majority of the fan base was part of a miserable experience for so long in their lives that it's almost like it's hard for them to accept that that's not what it is anymore. But Saints fans are just generally speaking. I'm saying not everybody, but generally critically negative. Anything that goes wrong, it's the end of the season. It's this, it's that. Everybody's got to get fired after a bad game, after a good game. And then the opposite. The fan base is either incredibly cold or incredibly warm. And I feel like there's not much in between a lot of times. It's very frustrating because I'm always very like logical and objective. And I feel like Saints fans, a lot of times, to your point, they just get very emotional about things. And we should be optimistic. For the last 2 decades, we have been one of the most winning franchises. And also, you're a better man than me. Last thing, because you left out. We're a bad ref away from very likely having a second Super Bowl under our belt at this point. And I'll never forget how dominant we were that season. Right, all the things. So the bottom line is the Saints are nothing to scoff at. We haven't been for a long time. So
yeah, I mean, the
Saints fans need to get over the whole the bags over the head days. It's not a thing anymore.
The Saints are very good at remaining relevant. And like we were talking about it before we went on the air here, but to lose Sean Payton and to lose Drew Brees, and we're 9-8, like go ask the Patriots, go ask other teams how hard it is. We are a Derek Carr shoulder injury away from having a really bad year. I think all of us can agree. Last year, the Saints were not fun to watch. We were not good. We were bad. But we're an injury away from being a 10-win division champion. And people will say, oh, well, the schedule was super easy. Okay, well, go ask the Atlanta Falcons how an easy schedule was down there because they were 7-10, right? And they had the 24th ranked defense with the easiest schedule in the NFL. So even with a bad situation in New Orleans, so bad that we had to fire the entire offensive staff, somehow Mickey Loomis in the front office has kept this viable enough to be a 9-ish win team. I don't think someone can double check me here in the comments below, but I don't think we've won less than 7 games since the year before Sean Payton's first year. So you're talking about a long stretch.
2005.
A year before Sean Payton, we went like 3-13. But since then, we're somewhere between 7 and 13 wins. And a lot of those 7-win seasons were with Sean Payton and Drew Brees. So we've been able to keep the boat kind of navigated even amongst turmoil, which is something that a lot of franchises can't say. Even good franchises. Like the Eagles won the Super Bowl with Foles, and then they went through this kind of stretch of turmoil, and they were bad, and now they're good again. We kind of keep it even keel. And as a fan, like that's all you can ask for.
So kind of with the ups and the downs, what do you think the ceiling and the floor is for the Saints this year?
Great question. I think the floor is about 7 wins, as history has told us. I do think the schedule, and man, this really throws people for a loop because I'll go on these TED Talks, basically, of all this positivity. The coaches are great. The players are great. We've got A+ this, best cornerback this. And then I'll say, we'll probably have 8 wins. And people are like befuddled. How can that be possible, right? The schedule's harder, no doubt about it. Last year, we had a really easy schedule. This year, we play the Eagles. We play the Niners. We go to Kansas City. Very difficult. We still have to play Green Bay. We got to play Dallas. So I do think we take a step forward as far as our scheme, strategy, vision, all of that. We got young players to develop. I'd be stunned if we won more than 10 games. I think we can. I think the Falcons, the Saints, and the Bucks are all similar, very, very even rated teams. I think the winner of the division will probably be around 10 wins, and then the next two will be like 9 wins, 8 wins. We'll be somewhere in there. So I'd say now if we go below 7, whoo, that's bad news bears. That is fire people, get rid of everyone, starts getting rid of contracts. So I'd say floor 7, ceiling, absolute ceiling would be like 11. I'm really getting crazy here. But I'd say 10 is right where you're at.
Yeah, I would certainly second that. I would certainly that's exactly like what I would say our ceiling and floor is as well as a Saints fan.
I went and we did the schedule breakdown, and I'm really big into sports betting and looking at Vegas numbers and stuff like that. And there were games on there that were closer spread wise than I was giving us credit for. Like we play Cleveland and we play the Rams. Both of those games, the spread was like 2-ish. We were like 2-point dogs, somewhere in there. But we were at home on both games. If you're a 2-point, 1-point dog at home, that's a coin flip game. And I was giving us losses for those games. So if we beat the teams we're supposed to beat, like the Panthers, we split with the Bucks, we split with the Falcons, we beat, the Broncos and the Raiders and teams like that. And if we can sneak out like those coin flip games, we can certainly be a 9-10 win team.
No, I think really with, like you said, like the Bucks and the Falcons, like really anything is kind of possible in the South this year. And as we move kind of towards the end of this, and just to wrap it up, looking at the Saints roster, who is a guy on the team that you think will make the biggest leap this year?
I think the biggest benefactor of this whole situation has to be Alvin Kamara. I mean, I think he is it's going to be him or Carr. Like those are the easy answers, right? That's the engine of our offense. So if the offense is really going to be as much better as I think it'll be, much more efficient and all of that, it's got to be one of those two guys. I don't know if it can be Carr because of the nature of this offense. Like he's not going to be getting back there slinging it. So if I'm thinking, okay, well, who will probably be the guy? You look at these other systems, and you look at the Rams, or you look at the Dolphins, or you look at the 49ers, and it all is kind of that running back. It all is kind of that running back room, at least. You look at in Miami, the Mostert A-Chain combination was, you combine them together, that's like 1,800 yards, right? So you throw in the fact that Alvin's going to catch a ton of passes. I think Alvin's probably the guy that should see the most improvement because he was awful, or the offense was awful last year. So I'd say a kind of a chalky answer, but Alvin Kamara's got to be the guy who takes the biggest leap.
I certainly hope you're right. I want to see Alvin get back to old Alvin. I mean, as all Saints fans do. And we know he still has some left in the tank. And there's no doubt about that. If this Clint system can revitalize him to what we know he can be, will be such a welcome sight. To transition over to our last question, our most fun question for you. Because there's some routes you can go, but there's probably a main one, as we know. But what's your favorite Saints fan memory? And just kind of break down, how that one went.
Well, it's crazy, man, because being a Saints fan, like there's so many bad memories. There's so many, like, especially recently. Like we've been a season ticket holder for the last, I don't know, maybe decade or so. So I've seen in person the NFC Championship games, the Vikings games at home, those awful, awful, awful moments. I mean, some of the worst. I think the Saints are the only team ever that for 4 straight seasons, their season ended on the last play of the game with that little stretch there with the Minnesota Miracle, the Minnesota overtime game, obviously the Rams game. My Saints lineage is kind of interesting because I think you're fishing for me to say the Super Bowl, but that actually wasn't a great memory for me because I grew up a Saints fan, and then right whenever they got good, I was like a freshman in college, and everyone jumped on the Saints bandwagon, and I went just super alt. I was like, you know what, y'all don't know these Saints, y'all don't know Aaron Brooks, y'all don't know any of this stuff. So it was very bitter for me those couple of years because I was so tired of like the bandwagon situation, and that was during the Super Bowl. So I really didn't enjoy it. And I'm from Mississippi originally, so Brett Favre was like a huge guy in Mississippi. So I was kind of rooting for Favre in that NFC Championship game where the Saints end up winning and win the Super Bowl. But the moment that got me really back was the day after Christmas, and it was when Breeze broke one of Marino's record against the Falcons in the Dome. Someone can check what game I'm talking about or the record I'm talking about. But me and a bunch of friends went over there, and something, man, just clicked. Like there was the music, the atmosphere, watching Breeze do that. It was like the Lion King or something, man, where I was in the elephant graveyard and I came back to the Pride Rock. And when I just saw Breeze do that, from that moment on, everything else went away, and that like my Saints fanhood just took off. And it's like I left the team for a second and I came back on my own, and it's just been so much sweeter. So if I had to pick a individual memory I always go back to, it's that memory right there, that game with Breeze breaking the record, being there with my boys, and that really kind of kicked off this run now for me as a Saints fan.
Dobbs, what's your favorite memory?
Answer. Wait, what were you saying, Hunter?
What's your favorite memory? I don't think I know your Saints' favorite memory.
Gotta be the Super Bowl.
I can tell you no doubt. I tell you no doubt. And because I would say before I do though, I was just say in contrast, like James, it's a good honest answer. And to the point of that, so now we need to see the Saints win one when you're fully on board. You know what I mean? We got to get one back when you're fully on board because it's only right soon enough, right?
If no one will benefit more from the Saints being good than me, because I have been so like I did not get to enjoy that. And especially now living in New Orleans, like when they won the Super Bowl, I was in college. I was at Southern Miss. So the fact that I've been living in the French Quarter for so many years, and if they won it, like here, oh my God, it would be so much sweeter than the other Super Bowl.
Yeah, we're gonna speak into existence. We're gonna find a way, who that nation, to get back on top. But Hunter, to answer your question as well, I'd say my favorite. It's no doubt. I can always remember. I remember the entire scenes and everything. My uncle, back when he used to have it was like a big townhouse. He would have everyone over every year for the Super Bowl, because what he would do is he had this room up on the top floor where there was this big like a green screen where he would put the or like just like a big, not a green screen, but
like
just like a little, like they use in school, projector, right? And he projected on older times. So he would project it where it would be super big on this monitor, on this on the screen. And there was plenty of moments for me, my dad, because my dad's Saints fan as well. We were very like, I remember after the first half, it was like, man, like we did good this year, like, but I don't know how, things are looking bleak. It's kind of like, oh man, like, we can still pull it off. But it was kind of like you were prepared for the same old, the Saints to pull the same old stuff. And so moving forward, right? We were coming back, and we're in it, and we're gonna finish it. And we just need one more play. And I remember I still remember everything where Tracy Porter makes the interception. And I look over at my dad, we can't believe it, hands on our head. And it's like, it's the moment you realize that like the Saints are going to really be Super Bowl champions. And we just big hug. We were both crying. I'll always remember crying for like those last 5-6 minutes, because I truly couldn't believe that the Saints had pulled it off. So that is, I'll always remember that entire scene, I can remember exactly how bright that the room was. It's like everything about that moment was truly special. But so James, we're going to have one of those moments now where you're fully on board with it. We're speaking to existence. I don't know when it's going to happen again, but the Saints are going to get back to the promised land. It's only a matter of time. It's crazy.
This year, like the Super Bowl is in New Orleans. And like I said, I've gone to every Saints home game for close to a decade now. But if we did play in the Super Bowl, I don't think I would go. I think I would go into the French Quarter. That's the neighborhood I live in. I think I would just be in the city. I'd watch it because New Orleans is such a special place where you almost, in that situation, you almost do have to be in the community. You have to be with your neighborhood and watch it that way. So that might be, ironically, the first Saints home game that I would have to miss if we actually somehow were in the playoffs this year.
Spencer Rattler ring
or in the Super Bowl this year. Whew. That would be wild. There'd be a lot of Derek Carr haters that would be very, very confused.
That would be crazy. But thank you so much, James. We appreciate you hopping on. You want to let people know where they can find you?
Absolutely, fellas. YouTube, we've got a million channels, but the main channel, just YouTube search my name. We do daily NFL/Saints videos there. And then, again, if you just search my name on YouTube, everything else will pop up. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. I'm everywhere, man.
Awesome. Well, I'll have that all in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, if you don't know ball and want to know ball, be sure to subscribe. Leave a like. Let us know in the comments what you think the Saints record will be this year. Hope you have a great rest of your night.